I beat bipolar disorder, a massive illness that controls your literal thought process. It distorts everything. I had delusions where I thought that demons were chasing me. I had to overcome all of that, learn new coping skills. And as far as the entire world is concerned, Gabe used to be a fuck up, and now he's not.
Damn, let's talk some shit.
It's Polly Siegel
and Victoria Aaron,
two licensed therapists who've spent way too much money on degrees, certifications, and trainings. We both love what we do and couldn't imagine working in any other profession. But we're forced to be serious all the time, and that gets boring. Shit Talking Shrinks discusses important mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while poking fun along the way. It won't be all fun and games because after every episode, you'll walk away with tangible tools to navigate life more effectively.
We love a tangible tool.
Gabe, we are so excited to have you on Shit Talking Shrinks. One, because you're so incredibly impressive, and Victoria and I don't really know why you said yes to be on our show, but you're here.
I love hanging out with cool people, and you're cool people.
Well, thank you.
Plus, I love the name. And I, as somebody who wrote a book called Mental Illness is an Asshole, anytime somebody creates anything and has a swear word in the title, we are bonded. We are like a group. It's like our culture. We have to do everything. There's a book called Fuck Feelings. I have to be on that guy's podcast. There's Fuck Forgive and Forget. I have to be on that person's podcast. Like, if you put a swear word in the title, I will be on your show. It doesn't matter. It is by law. This is the way.
I love that. That is so fucking cool.
Fuck yeah.
You're bound in the same way. You recognize that. We're all bound together. Now you have to be on podcasts that have swear words in the title. So just it does cut both ways. I just want you to know.
Okay. Well, then that means your podcast doesn't have a swear word in it.
Yeah, it doesn't have a swear word in the title. I almost said it's the lamest podcast, but then I caught myself. Oh, wait, I just said it. This happens a lot more than I care to admit. It's a lame title, incredible podcast. Incredible podcast.
Listen, we're so glad you're here.
Okay, so formal Gabe Howard introduction, because there's so many accomplishments here. Okay, so Gabe is an award-winning speaker, author, and podcast host who lives with bipolar disorder. He's the host of the #1 educational mental health podcast called Inside Mental Health for Healthline Media, and is the author of Mental Illness is an Asshole. That's right, Mental Illness is an Asshole. Incredibly impressive. We're lucky to have him, and we are just so excited to jump into juicy topics.
All right, well, hit me. I understand that there is I think you called it a silly question. I've been warned that it's coming, but I don't know what the question is. So I'm worried.
It is coming, Gabe. That's what we hope for. Go ahead, Polly. Ask away.
Okay, Gabe, what is your favorite sex position?
Oh, now I get the other joke. Victoria, shame on you.
I know.
Well, first off, as a 46-year-old male, any sex, if I am having sex, I am in a good place. But if I really want to take it to the next level and pick a favorite in the woohoo, I like to be on the bottom. I know it's partially lazy, but the view is better. Also, my knees hurt. My mom just turned off the podcast. I will know if she listens to this one because that's all she's going to say. Just no matter what happens from here on out, we could cure world hunger, cure cancer, solve every single problem in every nation everywhere. And I will get a text message that says, really, I did not need to know that, Gabe. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Listen, Gabe's mom, it's great that he's having sex as a 46-year-old male. We want that. It's very important. It blocks, it helps with depression and helps with interpersonal relationship issues. You know what I mean, Mom?
Yeah, it kills time between television shows. It really
there you go.
Perfect activity.
Okay, well, thank you for bearing with that. Okay, so today's topic is, well, let me say it differently. So there are a lot of people that are very skeptical of taking psychiatric medication, and they're skeptical of starting therapy. And there's a lot of narratives around what does it mean to be on psych meds, as I think even as just like a moral issue. Like there's so much inner turmoil around what does it mean if I have to be on an SSRI or a mood stabilizer? And what does it mean if I have to seek out therapy? That must mean I'm really fucked up. And so there are, even though we're in 2023 and Gen Z and millennials are all for mental health, there's still a lot of like resistance towards that identity or really owning that. And so that's what we're talking about today.
Just as a side note, it's also like, it's my favorite when I'm working with somebody who's addicted to street drugs and they're like, I won't take a psychotropic medication. And I'm like, dude, you go out onto the street and buy ketamine and you snort it all day long and you sit in a K-hole, but you won't take Cymbalta. That's fucking crazy. That's insane. But that's what it is, right?
It goes to show you just how deep context is. For whatever reason, buying drugs on the street says that you are in charge, you have authority, you are creative, you are making a decision, you are in control. Whereas taking medication as prescribed by a doctor, picking them up from a pharmacist, that shows that you're part of the system. You're doing what the man tells you to. You've lost control. Other people are controlling you. And it's a hard narrative to overcome, but I'd like to point out that both of those narratives are false. They are both unequivocally false. No matter how much we romanticize street drugs, they are dangerous, they kill people, and they have wrecked so many lives, not just the users, but the people around the people who are using illegal drugs. So yeah, go ahead and tell me again how in the 70s, some rock star wrote 3 songs that you love. I don't care. All right. It's so much bullshit designed to really just hold up this romanticized idea of something. And it's a shame because it's killing people, literally killing people.
And there's really nothing romantic about it anymore because now you have to test everything, you know, like you're not just like going and listen to Kurt Cobain and like rigging your arm up. You're like, I have to test this first. And that's a process. So it's like, there's just nothing sexy about it anymore, unfortunately.
I can tell you, I see a lot of, I used to use illegal drugs as part of, before I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I had no idea about any mental illness. In fact, mental illness was something that happened to other families. And people with mental illness came from bad homes. I didn't come from a bad home. So I had no reason to suspect that mental illness was an issue. And in fact, my parents, who I trusted implicitly, they looked at my behavior and they were like, hey, you're an asshole. And they were trying to fix me being an asshole. And I understand where they're coming from. I'm not trying to be mean to them. I'm just saying that every single symptom of bipolar disorder to a layperson just looks like bad teenage behavior or just bad behavior, period. So I used illegal drugs because I needed to do something. Nobody was listening to me. I wasn't getting help. So I was stuck trying to find help on my own. And I know that was a long segue to get to this point. It looks terrible. There's a moment where it feels good, but that moment quickly wears off and you don't have money. You're smelly. You're taking risks. On TV, it plays so sexy. Every time I watch a movie, I'm like, ooh, I want to do that. And then I'm like, wait, you did do that. And it was nothing like that. It was disgusting and foul. And you did get some moments of joy, which made it worth it. That's why people use them, because you get maybe a half an hour or an hour or 2 hours or hell, maybe even an evening. But then the crash comes and it is horrific. And I just TV does such a great job of making it look so damn cool. And it's a lie. It's a lie. TV lied to us.
No, not the media.
I know, not TV and the media. Where can you get the truth if not from people with a profit motive?
Okay, so I'm just like thirsty to know, what did your mania look like?
So picture a consequence-free environment. That's the first thing that I like to tell people. So the thing that holds us back as humans is the consequences. And the example that I always use is, does jumping off of a 100-story building kill you? And of course, you are going to say, does jumping off a 100-story building kill you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody says yes. It doesn't. That's not what kills you. Landing kills you. Jumping off the 100-story building is fine. You are alive all the way down. So when you have mania, you can't see that consequence. That consequence is, how do I land? If you can see that consequence, you become a base jumper. You get a bungee cord or a parachuter. You can tell I know nothing about base jumping. And you figure out how to land safely so that you can enjoy the sensation of jumping off the building without the unfortunate splat part. In mania, you lack that. It's here and now. The example that everybody uses is overspending. Why did you spend all your money? Well, see, I had this money on Monday, but my rent wasn't due until Friday. Therefore, that's a Friday problem. And that's how it plays out on a much smaller scale. So that's what my mania looked like. I did whatever I want, whenever I wanted, and said whatever I needed to say to get what I wanted in the moment without concern for the consequences of my action or how it impacted others. Because it was literally, people say, well, I say it's all about me. And they're like, so like narcissism? I'm like, no, like narcissism would have been an improvement, right? People with narcissism have jobs. They pay taxes. They employ people. They accomplish things. They're sometimes married and have children, right? There's as awful as narcissists are, there's a list of things that they did achieve that if you just look at that very narrow window, maybe made something for someone better. At least it had the potential.
It's like a protective factor. Their personality disorder is a protective factor.
It's incredible to say that narcissism would have been an improvement over mania. So you can only imagine how awful I was. And here's the greatest part. Mania has the best public relations firm in the entire world. No matter what I did and no matter what happened, I never blamed it on mania. It was always someone else's fault, something else's fault, a different symptom's fault, whatever. It was never mania. And, you know, as we all know, society loves mania. It's so romanticized. Oh, I was so productive. I achieved so much. I was so creative. And every time I hear that, I just think bullshit. Just liar. And I know that's a big, heavy thing for me to say, but mania is just as destructive as depression, but yet everybody just romanticizes the mania. I was so productive. I achieved so much. And I'm like, bullshit.
You did so much. You were doing so much shit.
You accomplished nothing. You have nothing tangible. You hurt a lot of people. You hurt yourself. But mania just skates. Mania is just as destructive as depression. It is equally destructive as depression, yet we define mania more often than not in society as being really, 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 really happy or really, 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 really excited. And see, happy and excited have positive connotations. We describe depression as being really low, really down in a deep, dark place that has negative connotations. Therefore, depression is bad and mania is interesting. No, mania is terrible. I cannot be more clear that mania is terrible, but it tells your brain that you are amazing. So no matter what I do, I'm incredible. And why would anybody want to get rid of that? I mean, literally being a god in your own mind, why would anybody want to cure that? And that's what makes it so hard to treat and to admit that you have a problem with it.
Well, in fact, in my private practice, when I'm working with folks that have that diagnosis, I have seen hospitalizations during mania for suicide attempts in that state. So as much as it's painted and sort of glorified as euphoric and wonderful, and you're on top of the world and everything is rainbows and butterflies, no, there's a dark side to mania.
One of the biggest dark sides, again, let's go back to that consequence-free environment. And this is where it's difficult to get stats, right? Drilling down and trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Let's go back to my 100-story building. Jumping off of it doesn't kill you. But you recognize if in the height of mania, I believe that I can fly. And that's a very realistic possibility at the highest levels of mania. This idea that you can control your surroundings and you can do things that other humans can't. So I leap off the building. That's going to be written down statistically as died by suicide because I leapt off a building. But in actuality, there's a possibility, and say I'm not around to ask, right? That's the problem with jumping off 100-story buildings. But there is a possibility with bipolar disorder in the highest levels of mania that I wasn't suicidal at all. I just thought I could fly, and it turned out very poorly. And you're thinking to yourself, well, that's kind of an extreme example, Gabe. And I agree, that is an extreme example. It's just for illustrative purposes only. But let's back that down. When we were 16 and we thought we were invincible, we all took risks driving our cars. We just did, right? And then one of these days, you spin out a little, you fishtail, maybe you get in a little fender bender, and all of a sudden you're like, shit, driving is serious, right? This is wow. There's something that scares us. Almost everybody on the planet has that little story of the first time in the rain, their car slid a little. And so imagine that you've got mania and you think that you're awesome and you can drive 100 miles an hour down your neighborhood, that it's 25 miles an hour, and something happens. It's not unrealistic to think that in the height of mania, you believe that you're the greatest driver ever, and driving fast with music really, really loud. I mean, that's a definite companion piece to mania. And a lot of people have really, really large issues there. And again, they get ticked off as traffic accidents, or it's so hard to get realistic data because you can't ask the person who has passed away what their motive was for the behavior.
Mm.
So what did the journey look like? When you were noticing these symptoms and they were creating destruction and interference in your life, how did you find help and get on meds, essentially?
The journey for me looked like I really genuinely and honestly thought that I was an asshole. I can't say it any more plainly than that. My parents, they tried to guide me, and I did not think that their guidance was ridiculous, right? It's not like the things they told me to do, I thought, well, that's unreasonable. They wanted me to go to school. They wanted me to get good grades. They wanted me to get a job. They wanted me to be a good person and not scream at everybody. They wanted me to keep my promises. There was when I was in, the average mood, the normal mood, the stereotypical mood, the middle mood, and I would reflect back on my mom and dad's parenting, their advice, their lectures, I would think, that's actually not bad. I mean, I'm not sure why I got so mad and had to scream at them because they told me not to scream at my little sister. Come to think of it, I'm 6 years older than she is. I'm twice her size and I'm screaming at her, and they're like, don't scream at her. That's actually really good advice. Why am I doing this? And since I had very little information on mental health and my parents had very little mental illness information, et cetera, I really bought into the narrative. It was because I was a bad person. And as I reached adulthood, it stuck. The narrative stuck. I would try to be good. I tried so hard, Victoria and Paulina. I tried so hard, and I would be good for a while because that's how bipolar disorder works, right? When you're, it's a spectrum illness. You got the highs and the lows that everybody talks about, but you've also got that nice in the middle. And I would do well for a while. And then a little bit of hypersexuality would kick in and I'd start cheating on my wife.
Yeah.
A little bit of mania would kick in and I'd start breaking promises. And when people were hurt that I broke the promise, I'd tell them off. So I started losing friends. And my family, they stuck with me. I want to make sure that everybody knows that my family stuck with me, but they had to set up boundaries as well. They needed to protect themselves and the other children. So while they absolutely unequivocally never abandoned me, they still had to put distance because now I'm an adult. They didn't put that distance when I was 16, but now I'm 20, 22, 24. And when I was 26 years old, I really hit, the stereotypical rock bottom that everybody likes to talk about. And I had a suicide plan. I was ready to die. I was ready to go. It was really, really bad. And fortunately, I ran into someone who noticed. She recognized the symptoms of suicidality. She recognized the symptoms of mental illness. She had a little training. Her mother was a psychiatric nurse. So that was, that gave her some insight. She had gone to college and taken, Psychology 101, which is great foundational knowledge. She herself had struggled with depression and had seen a therapist. So she looked right at me and she was like, wow, this guy's messed up. And I have no idea to this day why. She did something about it. She asked me if I was planning on killing myself, right? Just like perfect, right? Like I wish we had this on film because we should show it in every suicide prevention class. And she didn't ask if I was going to hurt myself. She didn't ask if I was, thinking about doing something that I'd regret. No, just looked me right in the eyes and said, are you planning on killing yourself?
Straight up.
Yep. Just straight up. And I answered yes. And long story short, I ended up in the emergency room, which led to me being committed to a psychiatric hospital, which led to me being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which set just that was the first domino. Her asking me if I was planning on killing myself. That was domino number one that led to 4 years worth of dominoes that ultimately ended up with me in control of my illness, in recovery, and the person I am today, for better for worse. That's what started this all.
No, that's excellent. It's amazing.
So was it at that point that was the first time you tried psychiatric medication?
When I was younger, so this is for any therapists or psychiatric folks listening to the show. When I was in my when I was like 21 or 22, somebody put me on antidepressants, and when you have bipolar disorder,
bad combo.
It triggered a huge manic spell, and this is probably a good segue for our next conversation, because herein lies the problem. On one hand, I was depressed, and when I got the antidepressants, it made me happy. Of course, it triggered mania because for those who don't know, people with bipolar disorder who just take antidepressants, it often triggers a manic spell. Now, the good news is I felt so good on the mania that I didn't think that I needed the medication anymore. And that's the crux of our segue, right? On one hand, I was depressed and I was really sad, and my general practitioner gave me psychiatric medications, gave me antidepressants, and then I felt really, really good, indicating, well, that they worked, right? I was depressed and now I'm antidepressed. And then because I felt good, I decided that I knew more than everybody and I stopped taking the medication. Now, in this case, it was a protective factor. Thank God I stopped taking the medication, because it would have just driven the mania to dangerous, dangerous places. But if we look at it from the other way, what do you mean you stopped taking the medication as prescribed? You didn't report any of these symptoms to your doctor? You just declared one day that you did not need your medication and just unilaterally decided to stop and then declare the whole thing bullshit and move on? That's not good either. And there is the crux of our problem.
That's so normal though, Gabe. Like even with no symptoms, people are just like, I'm fucking done. I'm over it. They just stop. Cold turkey. Going into withdrawal, brain zaps, not feeling right. They're like, I wonder why. Fuck psychiatry. It's like, maybe you shouldn't have just stopped your medication. Maybe get some guidance.
You ever had this like issue where just in our personal lives where you're fighting with your significant other or your best friend, just somebody that you're really, really close with, right? Not like a coworker, but like somebody that you're really, really, really close with. And it occurs to you at some point during the argument that, oh shit, they're a little bit right. They've made some really, really good points. Like you still agree with your points, but now all of a sudden this nuance is created where while you definitely think that you're right, you're also starting to think that they might be right too. And that's where I think that we get into trouble. When we look at the anti-psychiatry movement and we remove everything and we just look at the things that they're concerned about, I understand their points. We live in a system right now where if you take your medication as prescribed and it works, you have a good doctor. If you take your medication as prescribed and it doesn't work, you did something wrong. It's your fault. There is no mechanism ever to blame the practitioner. There is no conversation about improving practitioners, improving therapy, improving anything. It is 100% success for the doctor and failure for the patient. The end. And in this whole thing, as somebody living with bipolar disorder, see, I went from suicidal depression, godlike mania, and all, hypersexuality, just all of the problems that I had to even. That's what I got. The best that I could achieve was got my shit together. That's it. I beat bipolar disorder, a massive illness that controls your literal thought process. It distorts everything. I had delusions where I thought that demons were chasing me. I had to overcome all of that, learn new coping skills. And as far as the entire world is concerned, Gabe used to be a fuck up and now he's not. That's it. That's the best that I can have. But you know who gets a lot of credit for my success? Pharmaceutical companies, psychologists, therapists, psychiatrists, and don't get me wrong, they're wonderful. They absolutely deserve some credit, but they get it all. They get it all. Like, you're so lucky, Gabe. You must have had the best doctors. I know I've talked a lot, but I want to give this example. Could you imagine if you trained for 4 years to be a photographer, and you trained and trained and trained and had setbacks, and you trained and trained and trained, and finally, after 4 years, you took a beautiful picture and you showed everybody the award-winning picture. Like, it's amazing. Oh my God, that's the greatest picture I've ever seen. And everybody said, wow, you must have a great camera.
That is what people would say.
Exactly. And you know how painful that is? So you can imagine if fighting bipolar disorder for 4 years equals, wow, you must have had a great medical care. Thanks. So glad that I wasn't, involved in the process in any way.
People say that in substance use recovery, they're like, it wasn't me, it was God. It was like, no, motherfucker, you moved your fucking feet. Like, you got out of bed, you went to meetings, you did the damn thing. It's not just God, it's not just, it's like, come on, give individuals more credit. I love that. I love that you say that.
I'm super big on, look, we can share. Right. I'm not, there is, as we talk about the anti-psychiatry movement, they don't want to share. But I'd like to point out that the other side doesn't want to share either. There's not these robust conversations about giving more power to patients. If anything, there's robust conversations about how patients should have less power. And that's a real big struggle. And in America, we're really not good with nuance. We have for and against, for and against, for and against, for and against. That's it. That's all you have. And when somebody shows up in the middle, they don't get through the noise. When I first started my career, I really tried to look at everything, and I realized quickly that these two sides, I have this saying, if you pick a side, you've lost. You've already lost, because the sides are wrong. They're both way too extreme on almost every issue. Not every issue. I want to be very clear. There are some where there is a clear and definitive side. But on many issues, there's a nuance, there's compromise, there's things that we need to consider. We need to allow for all types of people across an entire country that have different socioeconomic statuses, cultures, ages, genders, on and on and on. So it can't be a one size fits all, because look around. America is not one size fits all. So the fact that there's two sides pushing only two options, one for, one against, is usually where we're at. You can already see how this is just going to fail. But here's what I learned when you try to be in the middle. I was really excited because I was like, this is going to be great. I'm going to be nuanced. I'm going to be in the middle, and both sides will love me. Nope. Both sides hate me. Both sides pick up on that one thing that I say, and they just hate me. Like, for example, when I go to the anti-psychiatry people, and I'm like, listen, you have these really good points. We need to have more control, more power. We need to take some of our power back. We need to be given credit for the hard work that we do. And I'm really, really good. And they're like, well, yeah, but don't you talk to pharmaceutical companies? Isn't your podcast sponsored by a pharmaceutical company? Yes, it is. Then we hate you. You're bought and owned by big pharma. You're bought and owned. You're biased and a liar. I'm like, I don't, what happened here? You literally agreed with me not 2 seconds ago. But listen, I want to make sure that I'm not just picking on the anti-psychiatry folks. I go over to doctors all the time, doctors, therapists, medical associations, and they just pat me on the head. Many of these places will not even pay me because they say, quote, you don't pay patients. Because, for some reason, I don't need to eat, and airline tickets are free, and hotel lines are free, and we have all this money. I have sat on panels before, and I read the evals. I'm the favorite. I can't say that more plainly. There's 4 people on a panel, 1 patient, 3 doctors. The 3 doctors all got $10,000 each. I got $0. I evaluated higher than the other 3. They were paid significantly more money than me if I was paid at all. And while that is slowly changing, we have to ask that other side, why are you so hesitant to listen to your patients? And if I said it in any other way, could you imagine if I went to McDonald's and I said, why are you so hesitant to listen to your customers? Could you imagine if I went to any Fortune 500 company who was struggling, having a problem, having a public relations issue, who had anti-Walmart-ish, and said, hey, you need to listen to your customers. And they said, no, we will not. We're right. Screw them. You'd be like, that is the dumbest business decision I've ever heard. But over on that other side, they're just like, yep, they're the patients. We're the doctors' orders. It's like, what are you doing? We've got to move more towards the middle.
How do you feel like how do you feel fundamentally that came into existence, where there's such a big emphasis on doctors being the magicians and patients not really having much of a role, or not being part of their own transformation?
It's really hard to speak with any definitive clarity. So I do want to preface this by saying I've got opinions because opinions are fun, but they're not facts. So even though I'm about to say some of this stuff confidently, I don't want anybody to hear it as I'm stating fact. But if we look at medical history, we used to have things like doctor's orders, right? People did exactly what the doctor said without any pushback at all. And maybe that served the country at the time, right? You know, medicine is a lot more than what it was when it was founded. So some of this might be peer pressure from dead people, right? We just have these old ways of doing things that may have been great 200 years ago, or 150 years ago, 100 years ago, maybe even 50 years ago, but they're not working in the modern world. And one of the reasons that they're not working in the modern world is because patients have access to more information than they ever had before. See, when I was 10 years old, I remember a life before the internet. So at 10 years old, if my doctor said something to me and I was hinky about it, I had two choices. Choice number one, I could go get a second opinion, right? That's not such a choice anymore because managed care, healthcare, it's expensive to get a second opinion. A lot of people won't pay for it, and a lot of people don't have money, time off work, et cetera, to do it. But a second opinion is still an option. But go back to 10-year-old Gabe, which was 36 years ago for those playing at home. My second option was to research it myself, like go to the library and get a medical book. There is no way in hell I'm going to understand that. Now, 46-year-old Gabe, even 26-year-old Gabe, I can Google it. I can listen to Dr. Google. Now, this presents a challenge, right? If you get good information and you understand your care and you understand things, you will, factually proven, do better if you understand what's going on with your medical care. But there's a dark side. You can also find all of this stuff that says things like, well, those don't work at all. You're just taking a sugar pill for $300 a month, or they're messing with your brain. Or, of course, my favorite from COVID, they're injecting a 5G tracker into you with every single immunization that you get. And I don't know how to get around that information, but the bottom line is this: patients have more access to information, and the medical establishment needs to understand that and change. We have seen this time and time again in the history of our lives, where business used to be conducted this way, then business changed. So if businesses can change, I think the medical establishment can change, but they really, really, really don't want to. They're just like, no, we said it. We're right. We're the doctor. We know. We're not going to listen to Dr. Google. Patients are stupid. It's tough. I understand that if you are a doctor that has spent, 8 years studying something and a patient is correcting you, that's got to suck, right? I don't like to be corrected, but you're still in the service industry and you've got to decide what's more important, the patient or your ego. And we got to figure out a way to smooth that out. And I don't know what that is.
No, I was going to say, it really, when I think about people's skepticism around doctors and psychiatrists and therapists, as you're saying, there's so much emphasis on them being right wholeheartedly. And that if there's a disagreement around that, then that's problematic versus it being welcomed and having it be this collaborative process where there's exploration and discovery. I developed symptoms when I was 12 years old in my legs that anytime I would walk uphill or do any sort of plyometric exercise, my legs would hurt terribly. And I went to probably 5 different doctors, and I described my symptoms, which I had already Googled. And what came up was exertional compartment syndrome. And when I would say that to the doctor, I think I have exertional compartment syndrome. Like my what I'm reading sounds exactly like my symptoms. Oh no, that's not possible because you're overweight and it's typically in athletes. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not an athlete and I am overweight, and athletes don't tend to be overweight. So it must not be that. So on my 6th doctor, this is back in 2018, I went to the Stedman Clinic up in Vale, and I said, listen, I'm going to tell you what I think this is. Every other doctor's blown it off, but I think it's exertional compartment syndrome. Like, will you test for it? Because every other doctor has just said no. He's like, yeah, well, why not? Let's test for it. Test came back, exertional compartment syndrome. I'm not the textbook person to have this disorder, but I think I share that story because I think that led to so much hesitation of, I don't trust doctors. They don't really take my experience or my insight seriously. They know what's best. There's sort of this like pompous presentation of, I went to med school and I went here and I know everything. And it's like, no, you fucking don't, because there's so much nuance. I wasn't the textbook case, but you still should have tested for it because I was advocating for myself. And as a patient, I have a right to advocate for myself. So I don't know if that applied to what we were talking about, but it felt like it did.
I think it applies. It applies 100% because I want to touch on 2 points. The first point is you telling everybody that story, of course, makes everybody who loves you, cares about you, knows you, trusts you, respects you, think, well, shit, maybe I shouldn't trust my doctor. Right. And that really, really sucks because whenever somebody says, hey, the doctor cured me, like, yeah, that's what doctors do. But whenever doctors do something that we don't like, we're like, uh-oh, maybe we shouldn't trust them. And that, once again, that's what's unfair to the medical establishment, that we have this ridiculous level of either they're perfect or they suck. That's the reality, again, is much more in the middle. Those doctors made a mistake. What they did with you was wrong. And you illustrating this point shows that this is why you should be a good advocate. Like, that's what I take away from that. You should advocate. If you're sure it is, you said you went to 6 doctors. It's a shame that you had to go to 6 and that people refused to test, but hopefully the medical community should hear this and think, why did we not test? We could have tested this with the first doctor and one of 2 things would have happened. Either she would have been right and we would have been like, hey, wow, this is unusual, but here we are. Or 2, they would have tested, you wouldn't have it, and they would have said, see, you don't have it. I was right. But now I have put your mind at ease. We can move on to other things, and you're not going to be stuck in this point. But here's the second point that I want to touch on. You have an advantage. You have a definitive test.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. The mental health community does not have a definitive test. And it cuts both ways. If somebody says, Gabe, you have bipolar disorder, and I disagree, well, what can I do? They said that I have bipolar disorder and they're trying to treat me for it. And I think it's something else, but there's no way that I can fight for that definitive test because it doesn't exist. And of course, the reverse is also true. I have bipolar disorder. Please help me. Look, you're just an asshole. You don't have anything wrong with you. Right? Just try harder, work harder, stop back talking your mom. And there's just no way to prove it. And even to this very day, as I sit here right now with all that I've accomplished, there are still people who meet me, who hear my story, and they think, he doesn't have that. He's lying. Some people think I'm lying for personal gain. Well, he's made a career out of it. So clearly that's why he's lying and making up bipolar disorder.
What a weird fucking thing to lie about. What a weird fucking.
But people are always there are Holocaust deniers, right? Like, people are fucking idiots. That's just how it goes.
But we have to consider that there's people right now who think there's something wrong. They're scared there's something wrong. And they go to their general practitioner because that's where a lot of us have to start. This is the day and age of managed care. We can't get right into that expert, right? We can get 6 visits with the therapist, maybe, but only if your general practitioner signs off. Maybe you get no mental health care on your plan, depending on what kind of plan you have and what state you live in. We love to talk about parity, and that's great. Parity is great. Parity is where they have to treat physical health and mental health exactly the same. I still can't find the company that has to provide parity because there's so many exclusions on the list. Well, if it costs too much, you can exclude out. If you do business in multiple states, you can exclude out. If you have less than 50 employees, you can exclude out. If it raises the price by 1%, you can exclude out. If it's against your deeply held religious beliefs, you can exclude out. What's the purpose of this law? See, murder is definitive. You cannot murder. Hard stop. Could you imagine if those are the exclusions? Well, listen, you can murder as long as that person's costing you more than 1%. Well, you can murder if murder is with your deeply held religious beliefs. We don't have any of this stuff over in murder. And again, I recognize that that's an extreme example, but this is how a lot of us feel. We're desperately trying to get help. We're desperately trying to advocate, but there's no money, there's no resources, there's no safety net, and there's glaring problems that people have been aware of for decades that have gone unresolved. And largely, the onus to fix this is put on people who, by society's standards, are out of their fucking minds. What do we do with this?
It's pretty fucked. You know what? Before I wrap up, I was thinking about, I had this moment with a potential client this week. It's probably like one of the proudest moments of my career. We were having a conversation and we both decided that we were not a good fit for each other, right? Like, and they had already paid the consultation fee, and it was like, it was just an admission. It was a collaboration of we do not fit for each other. And I think it was the proudest moment of my career because I recognize that, like, even though I am good at what I do, I'm not for everybody. And he recognized that even though I'm good at what I do, I'm not for him. And we were just able to like part ways. I gave him a referral. It turned out great. Like, it was just so cool because I think what is missing in the field, in any field, is really a sense of humility and humility in the sense of like knowing who and what you are and attempting to become what you could be. Like, knowing that just because you are a doctor does not mean you have all the answers. And there's an opportunity to have a conversation. Why aren't we talking to each other? You know, it was so cool.
It's so funny. We started this episode out really talking about, we went through so many different topics, which is so cool that we got to cover way more than we originally even thought we could.
Thank you so much, Gabe.
Thank you so much for your insight, your knowledge, your power. We're grateful to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really, really, really appreciate the invitation.
Thanks everybody for listening. Big, big love. See you next time.
Big, big love. Bye.
Damn, let's talk some shit.
It's Polly Siegel,
And Victoria Aaron.
two licensed therapists who've spent way too much money on degrees, certifications, and trainings. We both love what we do and couldn't imagine working in any other profession. But we're forced to be serious all the time, and that gets boring. Shit Talking Shrinks discusses important mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while poking fun along the way. It won't be all fun and games because after every episode, you'll walk away with tangible tools to navigate life more effectively.
We love a tangible tool.